Children often claim to have imaginary friends, make-believe playmates from their imaginations. But Susanna Hodson's invisible friends didn't want to play, and she was sure they were real.
This wasn't a good thing. It was actually really quite evil.
Susanna is now a 20-year-old university student. At the age of 2, she moved with her family to a large Sussex manor house. From as early as she can remember, she claims to have seen people that nobody else could.
Shortly after we moved there, she became quite disturbed at night. I mean, she'd have me up night after night after night for clearly no apparent reason.
I'd always sleep with the light on the landing on. And I just remember waking up in the middle of the night and feeling absolutely terrified.
She would talk about a man called George who actually quite frightened her.
For the next few years, the young Susanna continually claimed to see the man called George and a woman called Abby. Most children forget their imaginary friends by the time they start school.
Come on, Zana. Time for breakfast. I want you
But
to
not
get down your
Susanna.
keys before he disappears.
George and Abby kept me awake again all night.
You and your little friends. Do we should forget about them? Come on.
It's quite hard to believe that a child of that age is seeing something supernatural. It's not something you think about, so you tend to assume that these are imaginary friends, perhaps, that she has.
When I spoke about Abby and George, there was no recognition there. Oh, yeah, there was nothing, and that was quite confusing to me.
Whoa!
'Cause it was so real to me.
Bye-bye, darling. You're going to be Daddy's good little girl.
George says that I'm a bad girl.
Yes, well, George isn't real, so we can forget about what he says, Aren't you getting a little bit old for these play friends?
I was at that stage finance director of one of the top 100 companies. I was bringing a lot of work home, had a lot of problems, business problems, and the last thing I wanted was a domestic problem too.
But the problem wasn't about to go away. Susanna became more obsessed with George and Abby.
I had some very strange situations with her where she wasn't herself, in that she would come out with strange remarks.
Mummy, it's Abby.
Darling, this game's getting very boring.
But she's right there. Make her go away.
Look, there isn't anyone to make go away.
You're just pathetic. I hate you, I hate you, I hate you!
Susanna!
I wanted Mummy to see her. The Abby I'd been talking about, and she didn't really know who she was.
And that's quite disturbing for a mother. You just instinctively know that that's not your child talking.
Then everything changed. Diana was to have an experience that finally convinced her that her daughter was telling the truth.
Well, I do hope you've calmed down now, young lady. Zana?
I would hear footsteps running and assumed that it was her.
Susanna?
The odd thing was that the footsteps still kept on running.
The strange events threatened to drive a wedge between Daniel and Diana.
Darling, thank God you're back.
It was difficult in the
darling.
beginning with him because he really didn't want to know, actually, at all, and didn't find it remotely interesting or believable.
It's Susanna. Dan, I think I believe her. It's really scaring me.
Diana, I really don't need this now.
You know how it is. You get home, you're pretty knackered, and immediately your wife starts in on some problem that she's had in the day.
He just didn't find it credible.
I don't know
So
what
it
it
was
is. I can't
bashing
explain
my
it.
head against a brick wall, and he'd get fed up and cross. We'd have an argument.
What are you trying to tell me, that this place is haunted? Darling, right now, I do not need to come home to a house full of hysterical women spouting about bloody ghosts.
No, and I don't need you coming in at all hours of the night and not giving a damn about your family.
Diana was getting more and more concerned, and I think she was frustrated with me because I wasn't actually giving her the right answers.
But while her parents argued over whether she was imagining things, 2 floors up, Susanna had no doubts.
Go away!
They weren't trying to befriend me. They were just these entities that were in my life. They were just there. George had sort of shaggy brown hair and dark, exhausted-looking face, sort of pasty, not a nice face at all. And Abby, she had bags under her eyes and she had straggly black hair. I was so frightened and just curling up on the landing and just sleeping there all night long. I couldn't even go down the stairs, which was a short staircase to my parents' room.
Diana was now firmly fighting in her daughter's corner.
I felt that it was bullying my young. And I would actually get quite angry. I would actually verbalise that sometimes when I was alone and no one was listening.
You've had your life. Why didn't you just bugger off? Go on, go to hell!
You feel somewhat impotent because you don't really know quite what to do or understand how the whole situation is working.
Unsure where to turn, Diana contacted a medium in Portsmouth. She sent him something personal of Susanna's but gave him no details about what had happened. The response astounded her.
He said there are presences in your house. There's a man who's actually quite evil. His name is George. And there's a woman called Abby. When he told me the names, George and Abby, it actually was very scary because it confirmed everything.
The medium went on to describe a terrifying scene that he claimed had happened at the house when George and Abby were alive.
What he saw was a woman running in great fear, chased by a man. The woman's dress was torn at the back, and the man was coming with an axe.
No records exist of the pair, so no one will ever really know the truth, but it was enough to convince Diana.
The only thing we could do was to actually have an exorcism, and I'd have to try to persuade my husband.
So I said, look, you know, there is this problem. I don't really believe it, but if you can show me some kind of tangible proof, then we can take it to the next stage.
It wasn't long before Daniel would be convinced. It was Susanna's 8th birthday, and her friends were invited to a party at the Manor house. One of them was a young boy, also called Daniel.
I went inside. I think I needed to go to the toilet. I'm not quite sure, but I remember going into the house on my own. An old lady dressed in black. She was very authoritative. She did not want me to go past her. I just felt very uneasy, very scared.
Mommy! Mommy!
I just wanted to get out as soon as possible.
When we found this little boy, Daniel, he was screaming his head off. He was standing there by himself, and he was clearly very scared.
Now I'm older, when I look back on it, it all seems very, very strange. I am convinced, though, that I saw a ghost.
It was what Diana had been looking for. Someone other than Susanna seeing a ghost in the house.
I began to realize that we really did have something very difficult on our hands. And I think anyone who has any belief in the metaphysical and any belief in an almighty recognizes that there are things out there that you can't put your finger on. And I began to realize that this fell into that category, and we had to do something about it.
The Hodsons called in the church, who eventually sent a minister to exorcise the house.
One very bright July day, but surreal it was, I came back from work at lunchtime, and the children were dispatched with the mother's help, and Diana and I and this exorcist went through the process. He didn't look like Max von Sydow. It wasn't quite as dramatic as that, but it was very interesting.
At the exact moment the exorcism ended, unprompted, Susanna said something remarkable.
George and Abby have gone to heaven.
I don't know why I said it. It was just came from the feeling.
And I said, what's your batting average? And he said, well, about 90%.
I would definitely say that if we hadn't remained close as a family, that entity, whatever it was, could have really done some damage.
Susanna never saw George and Abby again. Perhaps they had only ever been a figment of young imaginations.
It all worked so simply, and the exorcism sort of unlocked everything and sent it away, that maybe it was psychosomatic after all.
But the story was not over yet. 2 years later, the Hodgsons moved to a new home. Soon after arriving, they invited their next-door neighbour, Marnie Jones, around for tea.
No, you'll love it here. The village is beautiful, and don't worry about the locals.
Well, I hope so. It's a wonderful place. It feels so at peace.
Why? Wasn't your last place?
Well, we had some problems at our last house.
Where was it?
We lived in West Broughton.
West Broughton. God. I used to live there.
That's amazing. For we lived in the Manor house. You know, by the church.
So did I.
Oh, my God. Did you ever... I mean... I don't know how to put this. You'll think I'm completely barking mad, but... Well, we had some problems there. Mainly with Susanna, our eldest.
Oh, my God. You as well. I thought it was only us.
In 1965, Marnie was a 5-year-old girl living in the same house as the Hodgsons. She has nothing but terrifying memories of the place.
I was too frightened to go and find anybody to tell them how scared I was. The feeling of being strangled. You could actually feel the fingers coming around your throat. The name George had a very strong ring to it. I think that there were other entities there, but George is the only name that I have. As soon as your foot got on the top staircase, you had to fly. You had no fear about falling or slipping, because that was absolutely nothing compared to what was coming after you.
The thing which really proves it was that we bumped into someone in a 1,000,000 to 1 chance who'd actually lived in the house quite independently and had had problems with it.
It still brings the hairs up on the back of your neck. There's no other way to describe it. It's a pure fear. And I would say it was evil. What was there was very evil. It still gives us nightmares, even to this day now, recurrent nightmares. And you know that that's a memory. But it really did happen all those years ago.